إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والسولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الرذبية والجود التقوية والنقاوة النكبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ويقول الذين كفروا لست مرسلا قل كفى بالله شهيدا بيني وبينكم ومن عنده علم الكتاب. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When one examines the literature about the events which took place upon the day of Ashura, they'll find that there are a number of events which are described which are miraculous or quote-unquote supernatural in nature. For example, when one looks at the account of Abu Mikhnaf as quoted by Tabari and in the 5th volume of his At-Tarikh, you find that there is the mention of an individual from the tribe of Tamim by the name of Abdullah ibn Hawza, who says to Imam al-Hussein that soon you will taste the fire of hell. At that point, the report it says that Sayyid al-Shuhada says, who is this individual? They say it is Abdullah ibn Hawza. And Imam al-Hussein says that, oh Allah, drive him to the fire of hell. And then the report it states that as the horse of this individual was going, it comes across a stream, it gets startled, the man falls off, his foot gets caught in the saddle, and his horse continues to gallop, and this individual dies as his head hits the ground from the impact. You find that such a report is mentioned within a historical account. Further than that, when you look within the work of Abu Mikhnaf, it's mentioned that there was an individual from the tribe of Aban ibn Dharim who says to Sayyid al-Shuhada that, O Hussein, may the water of the Furat never reach you. And Qasim ibn Asbagh al-Nubata says that this individual had such an infliction that even in the end of his life, he would drink from the water and drink from the water, but he would still remain thirsty. When we look at the works of hadith, for example, there are hadith which say that upon the day of Ashura, that as Sayyid al-Shuhada is being martyred, that there is an eclipse within the sky, and in the middle of the day, the stars of the nighttime were able to be seen. You see, when we have all of these reports, which are mentioned within the work of hadith, and they are mentioned within historical records as well, the question that needs to be asked is that how do we deal with such reports? That on one end, we find them within the records. But on the other end, you find that many may say these events are supernatural, that upon the death of a person, it is impossible for the sun to go into an eclipse, for example. Or it is impossible for the sky to turn red. Or it is impossible that just upon a dua, you find that an individual, his horse begins to shake and that person ends up dying. You see, when it comes to such reports, we find that two camps began to be developed. The first group of individuals stated that when it comes to the modern world, the 21st century, we should ignore reciting these reports and we should present the deen in a rational manner. You see, those individuals who say that we should ignore all of these reports and present the deen in a rational manner, number one, you find that one would have to examine that what does the Quran say about rationality? That if we're going to take on this issue of understanding these different miraculous events, then we would have to understand that what does the Quran say about rationality? Is there a place for miracles found within the Quran? So you find this was one group of individuals. The second group, they came forth and said that even despite the audience being a new audience, we should recite all of these different reports and traditions without even knowing whether the audience has a theological understanding and they have a theological framework in their life. You ask them that what do you mean that you should recite every single report? They'll say that these traditions, they increase our love for Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and in the way our parents would tell us these different hadith, we should tell our children in the same way as well. You see, when it comes to the second group also, you find that when it comes to other generations, there was a theological framework. That people understood that these are the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and these things are within the realm of possibility. But the children of today are born in a different time period. You find that many of these children are much more inquisitive than you and I ever are inquisitive. Just 2 days ago, a 9-10-year-old child, he asked me the question that can God lift a rock? Can he create a rock which he can't lift? You know, to be honest, at 9 or 10, I was thinking about how to stay up for another 30 minutes to watch the end of the basketball game. But you find these are the types of questions which are being asked. So tonight's discussion about what role does mu'jizat and miracles play within the religion of Islam is a discussion of the utmost importance, and it's one which we'll examine after one salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One more salawat ala Muhammad. For the love of Imam al-Hussein, a third salawat ala Muhammad. So tonight's discussion about what role does mu'jizat and miracles play and what the religion of Islam has to say about them is of the utmost importance. But you find that this discussion is not a discussion which is just limited to the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Because when it comes to Islamic thought, even from those within Islam in another school of thought, they have to deal with the question about the mu'jizat of Rasulallah found within the Quran. That people will ask, how is it possible that an individual is thrown in the fire and the fire becomes cool for him, as the Quran says for Nabi Ibrahim? And people will ask that how is it that the sea was split for Moses, for Musa? Or how is it possible that Jesus would bring the dead back to life? Or how is it possible that Rasulallah, as the Quran says, that he was able to split the moon? You find all of these different questions come under the crux of tonight's discussion. And we'll examine in the following stages. Number one, How do we define a miracle in an Islamic thought? And what is meant by the term mu'jiza and karamat in the Arabic language? From the second level, what does it mean for something to be impossible? Number three, in what ways does religion and science relate with one another? Number four, in what ways was Amir al-Mu'mineen the greatest miracle of Rasulallah alongside the Quran? And from the fifth level, what miraculous events took place upon the day of Ashura and after the day of Ashura? And we'll examine the subject in these stages. From the first level, when it comes to this discussion, whenever we embark upon a discussion, you find that it is of the utmost importance for us to define our terms. That when we're going to use the word miracle or supernatural or any of these different words to describe such events, we should understand that what does the word miracle mean? You know, when you look in the English language, a miracle is something which has been described to be highly improbable, but you find that the result is welcome. You find that this is one way which the word miracle has been used. Another way that the word miracle has been used is those events which are outside of the norm and they bring about a favorable outcome. You see, when we're going to use the word miracle, we have to understand that what is a miracle from the Islamic perspective. Within Islamic theology, the word for miracle which is used is either the word mu'jiza or the word karamat. And each of them has their own definition. You see, the word mu'jiza comes from the Arabic root word ajz. When you say somebody is ajiz, you are saying that person is weak. That person is incapable. That's why a mu'jiza, from the literal perspective of the word, has been described as something which makes the other person incapable. If somebody is arguing that this man is not a prophet and he is able to split the moon, then obviously that act is something which will render the argument of the other side incapable. But from the Islamic theological perspective, the definition which the ulama of theology and philosophy have given of a mu'jiza is that al-mu'jiza annaha al-amru al-khariq lil-ibada, that number one, a mu'jiza is something which is outside of the norms. That the first quality of a miracle is not that it is something which is impossible, but rather it is something which is outside of the normal means. The second thing that they say that a mu'jiza is that it is al-maqroon, it is al-mutabiq lid-da'wa. That whenever you have a mu'jiza and a miracle, it comes with a claim. When an individual is claiming to be a prophet, and that person, to substantiate his claim, shows such feats which are outside of the norm, only then it is called a mu'jiza. And that's why in the school of Ahlul Bayt, you find there was a discussion that whether this word mu'jiza could be applied to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt or the word karama in an honor is more appropriate. From those who said that the word mu'jiza is only from the Anbiya, you find an individual like Nasiruddin at-Tusi. But you find there were other scholars, when they examined the ziyarat of Ahlul Bayt, they said that this term mu'jiza is applicable to Ahlul Bayt as well. Because in one of the ziyarat of Amir al-Mu'mineen given by Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, when we address Amir al-Mu'mineen, we say, Assalamu alayka ya waliya ismat ad-din wa sayyid as-sadat. That, O Ali ibn Abi Talib, you are the protector of the infallibility and the purity of this religion, and you are the leader of leaders. But then after that you say, Assalamu alayka ya sahib al-mu'jizat. that you, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, was an individual who possessed different miraculous feat. So you find that that discussion is there. But in terms of common language, that was more so the technical discussion. But in terms of common language, the question that needs to be asked is that something which is out of the norm, such as the moon being split or the sun coming back, as the famous hadith mentions, how is this something which can be reconciled with our worldview? You see, there is a difference between something being impossible and something not occurring. A miracle is not the performance of something impossible. When you ask me what is impossible, for there to be a square circle is impossible. Because the definition of a circle contradicts the definition of a square. You find something which is contradictory to be in the same place in the same regard is impossible. This wall cannot be black in the same way that it is white. You find for it to be 100% black and 100% white is something which is impossible. But at the same time, when it comes to miracles, we are not saying that there is no cause and effect. There is a cause and effect. But oftentimes, we don't understand that cause. That through the advent of time, you find that at one time within the world, it was impossible to think that you would be able to communicate with somebody across the world instantaneously. If 1,000 years ago you asked somebody that can you communicate across the world in a second, they would say either this is magic or it's revelation or it's something which is impossible. But each of us today, when we open our iPhones and we hit FaceTime upon our iPhones, you find something which was once thought to be impossible 1,000 years ago is something which is occurring over here. In the same way, when we see a fire being cooled for the Prophet Ibrahim, or we see other realities, you find for a fire to be cool is something, yes, which doesn't occur, but it is not something which is impossible in the way that a contradiction is impossible. That there is a difference between a square circle. Both of these concepts, they contradict, they're impossible in that sense. And there is a difference between a fire which is being cool. You see, this entire discussion of mu'jizat and miracles, it led to the discussion about what is the role between religion and science. Because on one side, you found a group of individuals who said that this idea of the miraculous is something which is unscientific. It is something which is built on faith. With the advent of technology and the Industrial Revolution, you find in the last 3 centuries, there was a much discussion about what relationship should religion carry and science carry? And you find that this discussion occurred in the Muslim world as well. Within the Muslim world, you found 2 factions of individuals. One faction said that nothing within the religion is something which is compatible with the concept of science. Now, without a doubt, modern science has certain philosophical suppositions which contradict the Quranic view upon knowledge. But at the second level, when you look at the Quran, Allah within the Quran time and time tells us that go and reflect upon the natural realities within the world. The Quran says, في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. That within the changing of the day and the night, and you find within the creation of the heavens and the earth are signs for those who reflect. You see, it's very interesting. The natural realities were described with the word ayat. The verses of the Quran are also called ayat. This same word sign, which is used to describe the Quranic verses, this same word is being used to describe the natural realities. You know, whenever you have a sign, right? The goal of a sign is that the moment you see the sign, you get towards the meaning which is behind it, which is deeper than it. The moment you see a red hexagon, and on that hexagon stop is written, you understand that what this sign means is that this means for me to stop at this moment. In the same way, when the natural realities have been called signs of God, ayatullah, then all of these natural realities are taking you to a meaning which is behind it. And that meaning is that there is a creator who created these realities. So you find those who said that religion and science are two contradictory domains, you find that that hypothesis is something which is flawed. But from the second level, you find that when this discussion about religion and science came forth in the Muslim world, the second group of individuals, they said that everything within the religion should be in line with modern science. If there is a verse of the Quran, they would say, what does modern science say about this verse? And if there is a hadith of Imam as-Sadiq, they say, what does this hadith have to do with modern science? In other words, if I can put their thought in a syllogism, to them modern science was the absolute truth. If the Quran is in line with modern science, only then the Quran is the book of Allah. You see, the issue with this line of thinking is that you find that religion has its domain and science has its domain. Modern science, based upon empiricism, based upon observation, hasn't been able to solve all of the issues of mankind. The moral problem of mankind hasn't been solved by modern science. The issue of one's own humanity hasn't been solved by modern science. In other words, we need to recognize that there is a realm of reality which is outside of the five senses. And that realm of reality can only be acquired via revelation. You see, when the Quran, it mentions, O insan, use your aql, it says use your intellect when it comes to the creation of the world. Use your intellect to establish God exists. Use your intellect to establish that Rasulallah is a prophet. Use your intellect to establish that the Quran is the book of Allah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. A second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For each of your own marhumeen, the marhumeen of this community, for all of those who have worked to put together these programs, one Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم الذين أنعمت عليهم. Another salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we find that when it comes to this discussion, religion has its domain and science has its domain. When you look at the Quran, as to the verses of the Quran, they say, O mankind, reflect upon the natural world. Reflect upon yourself. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. Until it becomes clear to Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So each of them has their own domain within that discussion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Can we raise the volume? We'll raise the volume a little bit and this mic is fine, inshallah. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We'll give it one more minute. If the mic doesn't fix, then I'll request all of you to move closer towards the minbar and we'll go even without the mic.
Test, test. You hear that, right? In the Mac.
Put it right here. Wherever you think is best, inshallah. No problem, no problem. But is that turning on? It's not on. The mic isn't on. There we go. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So each of these different realities has its domain. You see, when they come and they ask that we have traditions about wudu, if an individual sanitizes themselves or cleans themselves in a different manner, is that sufficient? You find that reality isn't sufficient. Because when it comes to the understanding of the religion, the source is the Quran and the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam as well as the Prophet. And that's why when you look at this whole role of mu'jizat and miracles, you find that the role of miracles is to establish the prophethood of Rasulallah. That's why when you look in the Quran, in chapter 13, verse 43, the Quran, it says, وَيَقُولُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَسْتَ مُرْسَلًا قُلْ كَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكُمْ وَمَنْ عِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْكِتَابِ. That, O Prophet of God, when they say that you are an individual who is not a messenger, say that between me and you there are two individuals who are witnesses. The first witness is Allah. The second witness is that individual who has the knowledge of the entire book. You see, what this verse is speaking about is that it is establishing the prophethood of Rasulallah. And over here, a miracle is that which establishes the prophethood of a prophet. The first thing which establishes, the first evidence is Allah. Now, what does this verse mean when it says Allah is a witness to the prophethood of the prophet? What this means is that Allah's witnessing is not a witness in words. If those individuals could speak with Allah, and Allah was their witness, at the end of the day, there would be no problem because they have direct communication. But the witnessing of God takes place in action. That's why the evidence from the part of Allah is the Quran. The Quran is that miracle that when the Quran says that Allah is a witness, this is in reference to the words of Allah. But at the second level, there was an individual who was described as the one who was a witness for Rasulallah. And the quality of this individual is that the knowledge of the book was with that individual. You know, whenever you have evidence, in logic we say, that evidence must be in accordance with the subject. If I have an issue in mathematics, I am not going to go and do the scientific method to solve it because it is not the realm of mathematics. Or if I have an issue in philosophy, I'll use the rules of philosophy. So if the Quran says that there is an individual who is a piece of proof for Nabuwat and Risalat, whatever the reality of Risalat is, then that proof must be part of that reality. If the reality of Risalat is that it is a connection between the ghaib, the unseen, and this world, then that evidence must also be a connection between the unseen and this world. And that's why when you look at the reality of that individual, there are many mufassirin who discussed that who is that individual who had the knowledge of the book. For example, there were works of hadith and other schools of thought that said when this ayat says that that witness of your prophethood is Allah and the one with the knowledge of the book, it's in reference to a Jewish individual by the name of Abdullah bin Salam who had become Muslim, and because he knew about the Torah, he had knowledge of the book. Or they said generally it is speaking about those converts from Christianity or Judaism into the religion of Islam. You see, the first issue with this point is that individuals like At-Tamim al-Dari or Abdullah bin Salam or Salman al-Farsi who had become Muslim from Christianity or Judaism to Islam, these individuals converted in Medina. This verse is revealed in Makkah, that they come much after. But when you look at the tafsir of As-Suyuti, Ad-Durr al-Mantur, he narrates from Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, and he narrates from Ibn Abbas, and he narrates from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that all of this verse is in reference to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. You see, in this manner, Ali bin Abi Talib, after the Quran, was the greatest mu'jiza of Rasulallah. Because there needs to be a link between the one who is claiming and the evidence. And in that manner, you find Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Quranic verse says that the knowledge of the book was with him. You see, in the time of Sulaiman hears that there is a lady who has a kingdom. And that lady, the queen of Sheba, that she had established a kingdom. Sulaiman says to his people that which one amongst you can bring that throne towards me. The Quran says, قَالَ إِفْرِيتٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ, that one of the jinn said, O Sulaiman, before you stand up, I'll have that throne in front of you. After that, you find there was an individual. The Quran says this individual had ilmun min al-kitab, that he had a portion of that knowledge. And he said, O Sulaiman, I will bring that throne even before you blink your eye. You see, this action which is being carried out is not just knowledge of the Sharia, but it is knowledge of existence. It is only because of that knowledge of existence that individual could bring that throne from across the world. When Ali bin Abi Talib in this ayat is described, that all of the knowledge of reality is with that individual, this book is not just the book of Shariat or the Quran, but rather this book is of that knowledge of existence. That's why there are many ulum that were understood at the door of Amir al-Mu'mineen before anywhere else. You know, in modern psychology, we speak of the concept of a subconscious realm. that which is within our subconscious, it manifests itself within our words, within our actions, and within our thoughts. Amir al-Mu'mineen alluded to this reality 1400 years ago. There's a hadith of the Imam which says, Ma admara imra'un fi qalbihi shay'an. That there is nothing an individual hides within their heart, illa dahara, except that it makes itself manifest upon his face and upon his tongue. You see, that reality which is in the heart of an individual, in one way or another, or in some form, you find it manifests. And in that way, and many other forms, Amir al-Mu'mineen is that mu'jiza of Rasulallah. So you find miracles, number one, in summary, are not something which is impossible. The second aspect of miracles is that they establish the claim of a prophet, and then from the third level, they are something which is outside of the norm. That's why if these realities are in the Rasulallah, if the Prophet says, Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Husayn, that Hussein is from me, I am from Hussein, many of these realities are mu'jizat manifested on the day of Ashura. You know, it's stated, I mentioned the incident of that man, the Imam makes a dua, he falls off his horse, and that man ends up being killed. This is found within the works of history. Another historical record says that when they slaughtered that camel, upon which the head of Imam al-Hussein was taken to Damascus, you find the meat of that camel had become salty and bitter for those individuals. No, another tradition says that as the head of Imam al-Hussein is being taken, you find Shaykh al-Mufid in Kitab al-Irshad narrating from Zayd bin Arqam. He says that the head of the Imam would recite the verse, Am hasibta anna ashab al-kahfi wa-raqimi kanu min ayatina ajaba. That do you suppose that the people of the cave and the inscription are from our astonishing signs? When Zayd bin Arqam saw the head of the Imam al-Hussein was reciting this verse, Zayd bin Arqam said, no, this is more astonishing. You know, in the Quran, we see the example of Maryam giving birth without going through the process of pregnancy. We see the example of Maryam having winter fruits in the summer and summer fruits in the winter. If Maryam can display these miracles, can Fatima to Zahra and the sons of Fatima not display them? That if the Quran is giving this example about Maryam, who is Maryam, who is Fatima to Zahra? And that is that reality. And when one examines the traditions which were miraculous in nature, we find Sayyid ibn Tawus says that one of those traditions is when Imam al-Hussein was holding the blood of his 6-month infant Ali Asghar. As Imam al-Hussein was holding the blood of Ali Asghar, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Sayyid ibn Tawus says that he throws that blood into the sky, and according to Imam al-Baqir, not a single drop comes towards the ground. That what is the musibah of Ali Asghar? You know, it's stated in a hadith that Imam as-Sadiq says to one of his followers that whenever you have a difficulty, recite 2 units of salat, and after those 2 units, make this dua that Allahumma inni unshiduka bidamil madloom. That, oh Allah, I ask you through the right of the one who was madloom. They said, oh Imam as-Sadiq, whose blood is that of the madloom? Was it the blood of Imam al-Hussein? Was it the blood of Aba Fadl Abbas? Was it the blood of Ali Akbar? Sayyid al-Shuhada says, Imam al-Sadiq says, no, this was the blood of that 6-month infant of Hussein. You know, Allama Naraki would say that on the day of Ashura, Ali Asghar was so young that when the arrow went into the neck of Ali Asghar, the infant didn't know whether to smile or whether to cry upon that day. Ayatollah Muhammad Hussain Isfahani, when he wrote about the musibah of Ali Asghar, he says that, "Oh Hussein, what are you going to tell Rabab that when the white shirt of Ali Asghar had become red like a stone of aqiq upon the day of Ashura?" You know, on that night before Ashura, each of the women, they would speak to their beloved. You find Zainab would speak to Aun and Muhammad, and Layla would speak to Ali Akbar. You find that Abbas would go towards Kulthum, but it's stated that upon that night, Rabab would speak towards her 6-month infant. She would say, "O Ali Asghar, I am not from the house of Ahlul Bayt, O Ali Asghar. O Ali Asghar, honor me tomorrow." She knew the traditions of Imam al-Hussein about the martyrdom of this infant. You know, when the day of Ashura it came, after the martyrdom of Qasim, after the arms of Abbas were cut, after the arrow went into the chest of Ali Akbar, Imam al-Hussein was standing alone upon the plains of Karbala, and Imam al-Hussein would look to the bodies of his companions. He would say, "Ya Habib ibn Madahir, wa ya Muslim ibn al-Awsaja, wa ya Zuhair ibn al-Qain," that, "O Habib, O Muslim, O Zuhair, why is it that I call you but you don't reply to me?" After that, Imam al-Hussein, he says, "Ala hal min nasirin yansurna," that is there anyone to help us? "Ala hal min dabbatin yadubbu an harami Rasulullah," that is there anyone to help the women from the family of Rasulallah? At that moment when Sayyid al-Shuhada said that line, you find that cries begin to be raised from the tent of the women. When Imam al-Hussein goes towards that tent, they say that your child Asghar has fallen towards the ground. Imam al-Hussein, he picks up Ali Asghar. It's stated that he covers Ali Asghar from the heat of the sun. As Imam al-Hussein was taking Ali Asghar towards the maqtal, towards the battlefield, it stated that the other side, they didn't know that whether there's a child in the hand of Hussein or that Hussein has brought the Quran as an intercessor for him. Imam al-Hussein says that if I've done anything wrong, then this child is ma'soom. I've left the riwayah. You know, when Mukhtar would capture those who did the crimes in Karbala, he would say to each of them that, "What did you do upon the day of Ashura?" You know, I'll give you one example. Mukhtar, he catches a man. He says to him, "What is your name?" The man says, "My name is Bajdal." Mukhtar says, "Oh Bajdal, what did you do on the day of Ashura?" Bajdal says that when Hussein was on the ground, everyone was looting the body of Hussein. Somebody would take the cloak of Hussein. Somebody would take the turban of Hussein. But I saw that on the hand of Hussein was a ring. When I tried to take that ring, it wouldn't come off. At that moment, I took my dagger. I cut the finger of Hussein on that day. After that, Mukhtar, he catches a man. The man says, "My name is Ibn Khalik." Mukhtar says, "Oh Ibn Khalik, you did all of this on the day of Ashura. Was there ever a point that you felt remorse?" He says there is one moment, and that is that moment when Hussein was holding his 6-month infant. Not only was I crying, but everyone from our army was crying. At that point, Umar bin Saad, he said, Ikta kalam al-Hussein, stop the words of Hussein. Hurmala would lift his arrow, he would place the arrow back down. Hurmala would do this a second time, a third time. Umar bin Saad would say, Oh Hurmala, you are somebody who is hard-hearted. Why do you not fire that arrow? Hurmala says, Oh Umar bin Saad, you don't see what I see. Every time I want to fire that arrow, I see a lady. She says this child is Masoom. It was the soul of Fatima Zahra. Hurmala, he fires the arrow min al-uduni al-udun, from one ear of Ali Asghar out the other ear of Ali Asghar. Imam al-Hussein stands with the body of Ali Asghar. He takes 7 steps forward, 7 steps backwards. Inna lillahi وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ رِضًا بِقَضَائِهِ وَتَسْلِيمًا لِأَمْرِهِ. You know, one more narration. On the night of Sham-e-Ghariba, the army of Umar bin Saad was counting the heads of the shuhada. As they were counting the heads of the shuhada, they noticed that one head is missing. At that moment, somebody says that Hussein buried his infant within the ground. The head of the infant is missing. The riwayat, it says, 4 horse riders, as they're going towards the tent of Imam al-Hussein, they're taking their arrows, they're placing their arrows within the ground. As one point it came, one arrow goes into the ground. As the arrow comes out of the ground, on the other side was the body of Ali Asghar. They take their dagger, they cut the neck of the infant. Matam Hussein.
Hussein, Ya Hussein, Karwa, 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 Yasrab se suए Karbala, एक कारवां रुखसत हुआ, सर पे अलम साया फिगन, गाजी की आती है सदा, पहला सफर ज़ैनब का है, सुनसान कर दो रास्ता, कारवां कारवां अब्बास मीरे कारवां, क्या शान है क्या दबदबा, क्या लोग हैं कुर्रानमा, सल्ले अला आयात का है काफिला, मशको अलम इनका निशा, अब्बास मीरे कारवा कारवा कारवा, अल्लाह के प्यारे हैं ये, आले नबी सारे हैं ये, कुरान के पारे हैं ये, कोनेन के तारे हैं ये, ज़ेरे कदम है आसमां, अब्बास मीरे कारवा 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 अब्बास मीरे कारवा कोई शबी है मुस्तफ़ा कोई हसन का दिलरुबा है कोई अक्स सैयदा शबीर का ये काफिला तामे अलम जो है जवा अब्बास मीरे कारवा कारवा कारवा
सलाम कर बुबला या हुसैन या मौला सलाम हाय शहीदान करबलाए वफा हर एक ज़र्र से मातम के आ रही है सदा हर एक ज़र्र से मातम के आ रही है सदा अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली 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 अरबाब हुसैन इब्न अली अरबाब हुसैन इब्न अली अरबाब हुसैन इब्न अली अरबाब हुसैन चला हूँ करबला है ज़बा पे बिस्मिल्लाह है दिल में कलमाए हक ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह सफ़र कबूल करे या हुसैन सारल्लाह सफ़र कबूल करे या हुसैन सारल्लाह हम लोग अज़ादार हुसैन अरे वल्लाह हम लोग वफ़ादार हुसैन हम लोग तरफ़दार हुसैन ए आका मेरे ए मौला मेरे नौकर है सदा ज़व्वार तेरे अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली अरबाब मन ज़िक्र तो मजनूनम मजनूनम सर शिकस्तनस इश्क तो कानूनम कानूनम दीवाने तरस हमेशा मीकूनम दीवार तरस हमेशा मीकूनम हर चीका बेगुम अस्तो कमे अरे वल्लो इश्क अकबर महतरम अरे व ए ज़ीबाई यही यज़अल में अरे वल्लो इंजा वसीए मनहर में अरे वल्लो ज़व्वार तो आम मकसूद मनी मनो करतम आकाए मनी अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली सलाम इसका के हमको बुला लिया मौला सलाम इसका के ज़ाहिर बना लिया मौला सलाम इसका के दिल में बसा लिया मौला सलाम इसका के दिल में बसा लिया मौला हम अहले यकी अहले अज़ा अरे वल्लाह हम फातिमा ज़हरा की दुआ हम सारे सफ़ीराने अज़ा ए आका मेरे ए मौला मेरे नौकर है सदा ज़व्वार तेरे अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली अना ज़व्वार हुसैन इब्न अली ज़व्वार हुसैन और मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद